Okay, this is Diane Bostic, and welcome to Make Change, my new podcast. I'm sitting here with Tracy Chamberlain Higginbotham, a very commanding name, and a middle name, too. I had no middle name, Diane Bostic. They've never met me. They'll think I'm a staple gun factory, something like that. I'm here because one of the things dear to my heart is the concept of I have a condition, but I am not my condition.
Yes.
So I want to talk about your condition.
Okay.
And have you explain it and articulate it.
Okay.
And I'm only going to say alopecia. Do you have that? Do I have the first part?
You do. You have alopecia, correct. And there are different forms of alopecia. There's alopecia areata. There's alopecia universalis. And what that means is that our good cells in our body don't recognize our hair cells as being good cells. So they attack them like they were a flu cell, for example. And so the areata means that sometimes they just affect a certain area of hair cells, where the universalis, it attacks every single hair cell. So you can have, which started with me when I was 27, I had just a quarter size bald spot in my hair.
So that's when it began.
That's when it began.
It was not in full force yet.
No, it was not. I was only 27. I was at my hairdresser's and she said, "Oh, I think you might have alopecia areata." And so areata being area, so just a area on my head.
An isolated area.
Isolated. It can be, and it could be anything. So it morphed. At times it would just go away, then I would have two spots, sometimes one spot would be a bigger spot. Sometimes as it progressed, I would lose one eyebrow, but not the other eyebrow. Sometimes it was one eyelashes, on one side and then not. So it's a very strange, you don't know what your body is doing. It just doesn't recognize hair cells wherever it is as being good.
So were you at that point at a specialist to talk about it more, or did you do your own research about that as you were going through this process, which wasn't like, boom, one day your hair was gone everywhere.
Right.
It was
It was many
little
years.
patches here and there, eyes, hair.
Yes, exactly. And so I mentioned it to my mom, and she said, "Oh, your father, who they met in college, had that same thing when he was in college." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "Yeah, it was just a small patch, and then it would go away." So I ended up going to a general dermatologist who did diagnose it as alopecia areata. And at that point, they could give you shots, steroid shots right into the space of hair that was missing, into the bald spot, and it would come back. But then could be, who knew, a month or two later, and then all of a sudden was a bigger spot. So I eventually did go to a specialist in Rochester, a woman doctor who specializes in alopecia.
And how old were you then?
Oh, when my hair got really bad, I'd say the worst that it was around 2006. So just probably around the year 2000, I was losing like bigger clumps. And so I went out to her. And what they did is she put me on a very strong steroid.
Okay.
So with that, the hair came back. But then you get the lovely moon face and hair.
The side effects.
The side effects. I was more hairy on my face than I had ever been before. Sideburns and all.
What was going on in your life at that time?
Everybody... Okay, so I come from a family of doctors, and my uncle used to always say, "Oh, you're not sick, it's just stress." And or it's in your mind. And I'm like, it's not in my mind, my throat's really sore. And so, of course, everyone thought that because I was running my first business and trying to be a stay-at-home mom, that the stress of running a business and that must be what caused it.
They chalked it up to stress.
They chalked it up to stress. But then over time, as I found more... As I went to that specialist, and then I actually even went to Boston to make sure, because I have other endocrine issues, that it wasn't the combination of all these other autoimmune...
Something linked or related to
that was causing it. So I really needed to know. And they said, no, it's just this one autoimmune disease that you have that's causing it. So... I felt pretty good after that in terms of like, okay, this is what it is. I'm going to have to get shots to the head. I'm going to have to possibly sometimes take oral steroids if I like it or not, if I want to have hair. And it wasn't until after my dad passed away that I lost all of it.
And
So
how long ago was that?
that was around 2000. He died in July of 2006, and February of 2007.
Sorry for your loss.
Yeah, like 75% of my hair was gone. It wasn't total yet. So I think for me, I think it was a little bit of shock. He was 66, he had a sudden stroke.
That's young for today.
Yeah,
really.
a sudden stroke. He had just been on the beach with my sister. I remember the nurse coming in and saying, "He's the best looking stroke patient I've ever seen." And I looked at him, he's dark skin, dark hair, not even gray hair.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's sad. And then he passed away 6 days after his stroke. And I think the shock of it to my system, because I was so close to him, could have triggered
A more full
Yes, a more fuller
attack
immune.
there.
Yes. So the hair came back with steroids again, and then in around 2017, my stepmother, my beloved stepmother that you sort of remind me of in looks, passed away from Alzheimer's. And right after that is when I lost all my hair and went total universalis. So I said, well, I can't keep taking steroids because it's not good. It was bad for my liver. So what am I going to do? And at that point, I really had to realize that my condition was that I was going to have to accept being a bald woman until something else could change it.
What were your feelings and your thoughts going through your mind, apart from obviously the grief that you were going through? Because I, too, am very tied to my family. Yeah. So I had some impacts there. I understand all of that and how that, emphasizes whatever was going on physically in you.
Right. It's a great question because I relate it now, looking back on it, to the 5 stages of death. First, you're in shock. I'm not probably going to get all 5 right, but you're shocked, and then you're sad, and then you're mad, and then So I had experienced that with losing my self-image, my identity, and at the same time, I had been a woman entrepreneur who ran events, who was always in the public eye. I was on TV. I was leading events for women all over New York State, and I didn't think I represented them anymore. I was a bald.
You were very hard on yourself because you associated yourself with your wavy hair.
Because it was the professionalism. It was the look that I had, that I wanted to have, that I always had. The hard part was losing the physical self-image in the mirror. Looking and saying, where's Tracy? I don't know where Tracy is. I'd see a picture of myself and be like, oh my God, there I am.
It was tied to this work image.
Yes.
That was your joy, your passion, your gift of helping other women and building business, and just was there. Right. And then poof, lost, gone. Hey, why?
Yeah, exactly.
Why?
Exactly. And that's when I thought, well, I'm religious. I'm a Roman Catholic, and I just thought there's some other reason God wants me to do maybe something else in my life besides doing this passion work of mine for the past 30 years. Is being bald, because what we haven't mentioned is that I tried wearing wigs, and I wore wigs to my events. I was still very honest about it, but I didn't like wearing them. I felt like a fake.
Yeah.
And so I tried for probably about 3 or 4 years to not hide the condition. I told people I had it. I was very honest. I'm like, I'm wearing a wig. How do I look? You know what I mean? And people would say, you don't have to tell us that, Tracy. But I authentically did not feel.
When authenticity has become a core of what you're doing, aside from all the brilliance and creativity and everything else, then anything fake that you put on, you know it more loudly than anyone else does.
Yes.
Which brings me to another question that came off the top of my head right now. How did your friends and your associates deal? Did you lose anybody in the fray of changing Tracy to her authentic, now bald sense?
No, and that's the thing, but I remember being most worried about my husband and sons. Honestly, I said, I wonder if they're going to still love me. I know that sounds crazy, but that's how I felt. I felt in losing my physical attractiveness, I wasn't sure there was enough of me that would be enough. I jokingly said
to him. And when you talk about physical attractiveness, think about how us women with hair suffer, and all the products that we're trying to be sold when I have straighter than poker hair, okay? So permanents are there.
Right.
I looked into braiding, weaving. I said, that should be fun. It's $1,500.
Oh, geez.
So, and then for all of these new protein, in other words, it's a business of selling merchandising to women. And yet you see a lot of bald men walking around and say, how distinguished is he?
Right. I know, but there's just, until really kind of recently, there still aren't a lot of bald women that are out bald.
Yeah.
I mean, alopecia is starting to get a little bit of that recognition because of the Jada Pinkett Smith incident that happened. But, you know, my husband's, and my one son, who I love dearly, who's always been concerned about his looks, had a hard time. I always made sure I had a hat on or something with him. My husband and my other son didn't care. I could be bald in front of them. But being bald in front of somebody's like being nude.
Right, you're naked.
Yeah.
In a way that you didn't ask for.
Right, you know, I'm like, just let me cover up my head, even though my mother-in-law said...
Try to take me like this.
Yeah, my mother-in-law said, when she finally said, show me your head, I took my head off and showed it to her, and she goes, oh, thank God it's round. I'm like, well, what was it supposed to? Was it going to have like a big square in it? Like, but you know what I mean? Like, that's what you internally wonder what people think. You know?
Here's another perspective. Yeah. I have hair, and my husband's bald. We're opposites. And I've often wanted to have a pet like my single girlfriends have, but he doesn't want anything that sheds more hairballs on the floor than I do. Right. He does the cleaning, so I said, honey, just don't clean under the couch or in the corners of the room. Nobody's looking there. Right. You know, and this is an ongoing thing because he has no respect or cognizance of my hair needs, you know, and I'm thinking, well, he doesn't wake up with any, so why would he?
Right. Yeah, right, exactly. There was a funny point, just because I know you'll appreciate this just because you're a comedian. At one point when I was on the heavy-duty steroids, like I said, my hair was just coming back, but I had sideburns. Then I would have a shape, like a mustache would start coming out. My husband was developing like man boobs.
Leave me alone, I'm Italian.
Yeah, right, exactly. My husband was developing man boobs at the time, and we were
so we're equal.
And we were standing at the kitchen counter, and I looked over him one day and I go, oh my God, I have sideburns like you do. You have boobs like I do. I go, the boys are going to come downstairs and be like, which one's mom and which one's dad?
It's a little role play there, you know?
We can't tell anymore. So humor helped at some points.
It has to help.
Yeah.
And it's how you get through and how you really manifest that authenticity going forward.
Right.
Because if you can laugh and make your jokes about it, everyone else around you is off the hook.
Right.
About how to address it or how to react to it.
So I did not lose anybody. It was just me in the sense of not wanting to continue on necessarily with my business had more to do with my decision to back away from kind of the public eye.
So I would say that you have entered a great segment in your life of creativity, adventure, and sports.
Yes.
And that has completely changed how you view life. And all I could think about when I was preparing this podcast is, why not?
Right.
I'm alive. Exactly. My hair, or having it not, doesn't require that I stop trying things. In fact, look at the things I can do that don't involve anything but my physical, moving, loving body, and then do those. And so how many sports are now under your belt?
Oh, geez. So I'm going to go back for just a second. That when I was going through that stage of like trying to find where I was comfortable, even when I was biking, I always put a hat on, but I would take it off as soon as there wasn't anybody biking near me, and then I put it back on. So sports is where I found that nobody cares what you look like. If you're running a marathon, nobody cares about it. So that really triggered me to look more into the sports, which I had as a background because my parents were physical education teachers and coaches. So I decided one day, after I ran the 2017 Boston Marathon, I was inspired to keep doing bigger sporting events. At that point, I did have some hair, but there's 125 regular sports, like say badminton, tennis, basketball, and then there's about 45 adventure sports. So I have done, combined, I've done 85 sports. only about 4 or 5 adventure sports because you have to physically go someplace to do like canyoning, which is jumping down through like the canyons you have,
right.
You know what I mean? So
the setup is very
right.
particular.
Right. If you want to do kite sailing or like on sand, of course, I'm going to have to go back to Arizona to do something like that.
Right.
So so I'm trying to do as much as I can here around central New York as possible.
So I think you have a very loving family, supportive group of people around you, and a very positive attitude to begin with. I'm going to ask you, for somebody that may not have that really tight-knit, warm, supportive family situation, and they have any kind of an immune system a disorder going on, which does not incapacitate their physical mobile ability.
Right.
What kind of books or organizations or resources would you recommend for somebody?
And there are, so I want to say too, just being a female, that if a female has one autoimmune disorder, she's more likely to have multiple ones, which I do have. So there are so many great national organizations. So for the alopecia specifically, there's a National Alopecia Areata Foundation, and they have a great website, and you can find everything from information on the latest drugs that you can use, to therapies, to different groups, local groups around the United States that meet to talk about it. There's a group called like Bald Women Lunch. So I think that
you can find your niche anywhere.
You absolutely can.
And I think also mental health clinics that are open to anybody is a good place to begin if you really don't feel you have talking points with your family situation, or with your immediate friends.
Right.
You need to build that within yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And people are really kinder than you think they are. Because of my condition, and it was the outcome of why I wrote a book called Under the Rose-Colored Hat. Because I usually wear pink, because when I went to a deli, I was all in blue, and the person said, "Hey, sir, I can help you." And I was like, I don't look like a female. I'm like looking at my big chest. I'm sorry, there's a lot of talk about chest here.
For the first 6 months of my life, I didn't have any hair. My mother would take me out and they'd say, "What a lovely little boy," because I was muscular.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I'd say, "Thanks a lot, Mom." You know, so I didn't have any hair till I was 6, and everybody thought I was a boy.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
just is the assumption.
Right. So after that, I started wearing pink a lot. But the thing that I noticed that once I started wearing pink, I must have had an aura of, I'm sad, I'm going through something, because the people were the kindest. They would either tell me their cancer, automatically somebody had breast cancer, would tell me their cancer stories, would give me their seats, would buy me something, and I didn't want to try to explain immediately that I'm healthy. I just...
Color therapy is a very important thing to study. Just give you a small example of something professionally I did in the past. I did consulting with a orchestra leader, for youth orchestra leader, and he was a dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed Mexican-American man. And he said, "I don't know why that I don't communicate well with my orchestra. They play very well technically, but they're afraid of me. So let me come and observe you." So when I did from the back, I saw how the dark eyes under the lights, the spotlight that they put up there, make a shadow here. And he was checking his watch. I said, "Here's my recommendation. Take your shoes off when you go. Start wearing pastel shirts. Smile more, and don't look at your watch." And he wrote me a letter. He said, "I've revolutionized the way that people are talking to me."
Right.
Because he was very capable and a very loving guy.
Yeah.
But when he was up there, he had the auspices of Syracuse University on his neck to make sure that he had star pupils coming out of his class and performing. And the thing to light that fire was to make him comfortable and make other people looking at him when he was up there on the podium in a more comfortable way. And that was when we entered into the color therapy thing, and I said, I should think about that and look in my closet, because my mother would always try to put me in red. So for me, it became salmons and golds and blues and that. And you found pink.
I wanted people to see me in pink and ask me about it, and then for me to say, well, I support, and do you buy from women, and do you hire women?
So there's a whole culture now that's coming to the fore where women need to empower themselves and work together and break the silences of trauma from the past. I want to segue into that because your trauma was grief-related. And when you talked about the stages of what you went through with the loss with alopecia, I was thinking about what I felt when my brother passed away.
Right.
There was anger, there was bargaining, there was all the other stages we're talking about, and eventually coming to some acceptance. I would like to ask, on a lighter note,
Yes.
that we have in common two meetup groups, Run to Right with Julie Hughes
Love
and
it.
with SAS,
Yes.
Joe Cunningham
Yep.
and Laura Stisser and Jay Moranti.
Yeah.
And I missed this opportunity to see you in an improv group as an hors d'oeuvre. So seeing as we have this thing of there's no limits unless you put it on yourself or other people do.
Right.
We go to this improv group, and you ended up as an hors d'oeuvre. And I mention that only because now I know that you're cooking for priests, and I've seen a couple of hors d'oeuvres there. So tell me how
it all comes
you got
around, doesn't
involved in
it? Well, so I got involved with the SAS stands for the Syracuse Actors Studio, because of my sport goal. I heard that they needed extras for a boxing scene, and I did not know Joe at the time. And so I signed up to go and to be a spectator, while they shot this boxing scene, which is part of the movie The Sentinel that he's producing. And that's where I really first met him, but I was so impressed with how kind he was and how grateful he was to everybody that I then learned that he was the co-founder of Syracuse Actors Studio with Laura. So I went to one of their meetings, not because I wanted to be an actor, but just to kind of learn about what the Syracuse Actors Studio was about and to be able to do some PR, because I thought it was just a really wonderful...
I think recently you've been a assistant director?
Well, Joe, so what happens, so you never know what's going to happen, is from that point, relationships develop, and because I have a catering food service background, when Joe was shooting The Sentinel just this past summer, they needed somebody. I had never even heard of the word craft services. And he was, I've been in event planning, I've done catering. So he asked me if I would be the craft services person for the filming they were doing.
For The Sentinel.
For The Sentinel,
yes.
Right, which had 100 people coming to it. And so I agreed to do that, and part of that is my role in the film is that I am the lunch lady, which is
there
funny.
You go.
Literal and actual, I guess.
Whole film career rolls itself
Right,
out
it does.
from the hors d'oeuvre table.
It does. And so with that, I was just getting more involved with the people that Joe knew through the Syracuse Actors Studio. And then I started going more to it and just, learning and meeting some really terrific people. And then I said to him and Laura, well, and not everybody wants to be an actor. I can public speak, but for me to memorize lines of somebody, I just don't know if I could do that well. So instead, I'm interested more in the writing and the directing side. But anyways, go back to Joe's movie. He did make me, after I did craft services twice for him, plus showed up as an extra, an associate producer of his film.
Now, you've got a Roman Catholic background, so I'm thinking there's some connection there that got you to the priest's table and said, we need you for our craft services every afternoon.
I know, and you know what? They're just such lovely people. I feel so. Not everybody feels safe around Catholic priests, and I understand. There are not good people out there in the world, and there are not good Catholic priests out there in the world. But the three that I work for are so wonderful, and when I'm in there cooking for them, they're so appreciative because they're giving out to everybody. You know what I mean? So to just be able to go in and cook,
they're in a way, if you think about it. Public servants, the ones that are truly following the faith.
Yes.
Batteries for other people.
Yes.
So you talk about confessionals.
Yes.
You talk about if you're even the slightest bit empathetic, you're going to be exhausted at the end of one confessional, and then you've got 3 or 4 of them.
Right.
So to have somebody come in and delight them with
some kind of
gustatory delights,
Yes.
as I would say. I mean, from what I've gleaned from your Facebook
Yes.
posts, they look great. I'm thinking, if she has any leftovers, I should really be in touch with
My
her.
husband asked me that too, because I'll come home and I'm like, okay, I don't want to cook for us now. I'm tired. I'm cooking for
What's this pizza you ordered, Mom?
Yeah,
Look
right.
what you just made for the priest. What's wrong with you?
So that's changed a lot. I've actually lost some weight since it because I don't cook dinner at home for us. But yeah, just going back to the Syracuse Actors Studio, it's just a wonderful community of creatives.
Right.
You've been there, people can do monologues, you can learn about writing, you can learn about producing, you can learn about trying out for shows that are here locally, productions. So if there's anybody listening that's interested in that side of it, I would suggest the Syracuse Actors
for these
Studio.
two people here, these two boomers here,
Yeah.
thanks for your sympathy in advance, Gen Zs. Because even if we sent you the invitation nicely on your cell phone,
Right.
you probably wouldn't come unless we had a trivia game.
Right. And there's some really fantastic young actresses
Oh yeah, this
and
is
actors there.
Actually, I had in the box a couple stories that my father had written in 1947, and so that led to 1, 2, 3, 4 things. But once I started to inhabit my mind with the voices of some of these young actresses, I said
Right.
that inspired me to get back to writing.
Yes.
And now I'm working on a short film.
Right.
So I think a takeaway from all of this is you discovered SAS, and it brought out things for you, and for me it brought out other things too, with more of an acting and performance background.
Right.
But also writing and directing is very deep in my heart at
Yes.
this point. I would like to turn also to the trauma that's not related to losing a family member, but has to do with that young women have
Yes.
from sexual abuse.
Yes.
And I think about one instance of this. Of course, when I was reeling from my brother's suicide, there was multiple things going on with me. I was deeply into menopause anyway, and I had to be watching what I'm eating, what I'm doing, and I just ignored myself. I got down to 98 pounds.
Oh.
I tell everybody it was
Wow.
very embarrassing and frustrating to have to go down to Walmart for my new summer bikini in the toddler section.
Right.
But then I was encouraged when I got into the
never
teen boys'
happened for me.
pants. I didn't get on the scale. I knew I was gaining it back.
Right.
So I brought humor out of that. But what I realized was I went through all these stages of grief, and then I have a story about my first marriage, which was I was a survivor of violence from a young GI Army person that was drafted during the last draft that we had in 1973. And I wrote this story, and I said, I need to make that a play.
Right.
And all of these writings have nothing to do with me being in them.
Right.
So it puts me up into
Yes.
the writing, directing category and casting and all that. The point is of this podcast is that what I said in the beginning still holds is you are not limited except by your own beliefs about who you are
True.
or by others' beliefs about who you are.
True.
And that to make change and to be involved in it is sometimes a baby step process.
I also would add, and it came last night as I was listening to the news breaking about the Epstein files, and it also came when I took 120 women to the Women's March in D.C. in 2017. And at that time, I had a friend who said, you're not going to protest Trump, are you? And I said, no, I'm going to remind this new government coming in that women make up 51% of our population, and we shouldn't be forgotten.
Right.
And what happened leading up to that were the phone calls that I received from so many women that had sexual abuse stories. So that was right around still Me Too, I think, time frame.
Right.
So I came out with the story that I'd lived next to a pedophile. And even though he never raped us, he physically showed himself to us all the time. And so it was something that just bothered my sister and I, and we never told our mothers because we were too young. But the stories that I heard from women, every woman had a story. That's what shocks me. And it's not just women, because I do know of men who have had that as well. But how reluctant we all are to come out and to talk about it. So last night when the woman speaking, and I can't remember her name, said, I didn't feel normal until I had these other women that were from all over the United States talking about the same issue, That's where I got my
The
strength from.
normalization of what has happened to you and just putting it away and saying, this is normal,
Right,
disappears when you're in
Right.
the league of people all affected by the same thing.
right.
And that is a power play by a narcissist, a male figure or a female figure that compromises the physical, sexual
Right.
self
Yeah.
at a very young age or at any time in their
Right.
life. So all of this going out in performance, I didn't want to do it. I just said, I'll just sit in my room and look at my brother's art. And,
Yeah.
then the bills kept coming in and the taxes went up. And then I got my appetite back and I said,
Right.
this isn't going to work.
Well,
I got to get out.
Well,
and
I
talk
think
to
it's that we
people.
have to express it somehow. So I'm not surprised that within the community, the creative community of individuals that I have met throughout my life, not just here locally, have some story that they need to get the expression out of
Right.
themselves.
Whether they write a poem, whether they
Right.
meet with a group,
Exactly.
whether they meet with a counselor,
Yes.
wherever the seed is to start that coming out.
Right.
I mean, I had forgotten I had written this story, but as I went through my boxes, I just say what presents itself to me, which is telling me to work on this, and that was pigeons. The little girl in the story, she's 18, 19, takes care of baby pigeons.
Okay.
And she also becomes pregnant in the story, and she also leaves her abuser. And we are all bridge builders.
Yes, so true.
Because we're passing through, and we don't know where our end stop is.
Right.
But along the way, if we make a bridge and a light for somebody coming after,
Right.
we've committed ourselves to the world in the way that we were meant to.
Yeah. I have a favorite quote, and I actually delivered this. I was SUNY Oswego's, where I went to school, and I was very involved with them in a lot of alumni and leadership roles, and they asked me to be the speaker for their Merit Scholarship Award luncheon. And I ended the quote, or ended my speech with a quote that I have that it says, "Your life is a gift from God. What you do with your life is your gift back to God." And that's how I feel. That's why I've always tried to do as much as I can for wherever I am in my space in life.
Once you've unwrapped that package,
Yeah,
what do you do with the gift?
right.
How does that live on?
Yeah. Well, exactly. How many lives can you touch in a positive way? And so for me, if it's opening a door or buying somebody's coffee or donating my time to SAS or coming here and speaking on your podcast, how can I help others and feel like I'm giving back to God what the wonderful life that I've had?
The other side of that is karma, and what goes around comes back to you in ways you may not even see as important to you right away.
Right.
But like the house here, I told the house
Exactly.
story, how that came about, and it's to give me this room to share this mission and this passion, and eventually a podcast and other
Right.
things too.
Right. It's wonderful.
Tracy, it has been wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you so much
to
for
make
having
change,
me.
and certainly you're continuing to make change in your own life. What's next up for your
Oh
sports?
no! What's next?
Oh, next 5 years. Let's end with
Next
that.
5 years. Probably sports are easier than next 5 years. I just always want to find meaning in my life. So, I would have never guessed I would have been involved in a Run to Right group. I wouldn't have, when I closed Women Ties, I had at 1,500 members. And when I, and I had so many active members, and I thought, when I close this door, I'm closing off this massive community of people that I have built for 20 years.
Right.
I mean, there's no way I'll be alone. And then, you know what I mean? People have other things they're doing. So you have to say yes to things. So the Run to Right community has been just a real blessing. The Syracuse Actors Studio has been a real blessing. The women I have met in sports have been terrific. Like, I met Billie Jean King because of it. I mean, so I think for 5 years, I'm not sure. I just hope my sports will keep leading me to these wonderful opportunities.
So you built these organizations, and now you're part of organizations that are giving back to you these little pieces of yourself that you thought, gee,
Right.
I spent the time on these 1,500 people. Aren't they just going to follow me wherever
Aren't they
I
just,
do?
Yeah, exactly. You sort of think you have an entourage going. I can see why, like, pro football players or, even actresses and actors, once they get to a certain page, place in their life. They lose their fans. What do you do without it? Not that I was, but I did have it. I was a leader for a very long time.
But there's always an ability to manifest building on what you have in the past with something new.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know what happens, but sport-wise, I'm looking at doing dog sledding.
Oh, wow.
That's on the list.
Are you going up to Alaska for that?
Winter? No, right here we can go up to the Tug Hill Plateau to do it.
I forgot Tug Hill.
I am
under snow right now, I think.
Lake Placid. I'm going to do the biathlon. I love shooting and I love cross-country skiing. So that's where you cross-country ski and then you're revved up, but you have to slow down enough to shoot at targets. So that's on my list to do for Lake Placid. So,
okay, creative, literary, film, acting. Anything there?
Yeah, well, interesting enough, my sister and I always wanted to write a story about our upbringing because it was so different. Multiple divorces, multiple new people, just way too long for this podcast. We were going to call it the Manhattan Babies because we were told that the only reason we kind of came into life was because my mother was drunk on Manhattans. I just found out recently that was a joke. I took it very literally. So every birthday I have a Manhattan. So we were going to write a story called The Manhattan Babies with her telling her, intersecting where our lives did, but very different. I think my sister just only wants me to write the Manhattan. So it's just going to be the Manhattan Baby.
Okay.
So it's still going to be touching on the things of my life that I think are important and the lessons for other women and girls to learn.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Because upbringing is what they say you're created. Your personality is created in the first 5 to 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That you're on this planet.
Yes, I hit
So if you go back to those Manhattans,
yeah,
going down that throat there, and
the whole point was my mom and dad really.
Do you like olives, by the way?
Yeah, no, they weren't really even drinkers. So it happened to be that it was all my sister and I are both born in November. That happened if you count backwards, the Manhattan. So, anyways, it's going to be a story of something to do.
Where can
with
they follow you now? Substack, right?
So I have a Substack under Tracy Higginbotham. I'm sometimes under Tracy Chamberlain Higginbotham. Going back to my maiden name, we're going to wrap it up right here. Women should keep their maiden name attached to them for their whole life, or they will not be found in history.
That's correct. I never gave up mine.
Yep, it's very true. When I went to help try to find the suffragettes that were buried, that weren't the popular Susan B. Anthony's, around the time of the 100th anniversary of suffrage here in New York State.
Wasn't there some law going on where women should take the name for their husband's name?
I think they've always had to, but there were women that still... I guess it's a good question. At what point could legalize it? So I made sure that my middle name became Chamberlain, which was my maiden name, so I can be found. So if I'm under Tracy Chamberlain Higginbotham or Tracy Higginbotham.
It's been a complete delight, informative, and important podcast that I had, my first podcast for To Make Change. This is Diane Bostic. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Tracy, for being here. And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.